Welcome to the Corona Shift, the podcast that explores the changing landscape of Canadian performance art during the coronavirus outbreak. The world is but a stage? Not anymore, sucker. You butts not... Sorry. We're canceled. We're closed. Each week I chat with a different guest about their experiences in isolation and how they're adapting to the transition from the stage to the online world. This is going to be a great show. We'll have comedians, drag artists, magicians, burlesque performers, strippers. That's right. We're the only podcast in the world that has strippers. Join us each week until this whole crazy pandemic is over, because I know you're locked up and you've got nothing better to do. And neither do I, really. That's why I'm doing this. I mean, I'm bored. It's been weeks since I've been outside. Somebody help me. Welcome to the Corona Shift, the podcast that asks performers how they're getting by when the bars are closed and all the shows are canceled. I'm Alice Rose, and joining me today is an incredibly funny comic from Vancouver. His album Burger Queen is available on Spotify, Apple Music, and Google Play. Hi, Steve.
Hello. Hi, Alice. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Vancouver that no one's allowed to go outside and enjoy. But it's fine. We're all getting by.
And sunny days are so few and far between in Vancouver as well.
It really is. This is honestly the driest and sunniest March I think we've had since I was like a child, or like since like in years and years and years. But I mean, what are you going to do?
Right. Bittersweet. Absolutely bittersweet. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's nice and sunny and warm today in Toronto as well. So I'm liking that. Got the windows open, and so if you hear any traffic in the background, too bad. It's my show. I'm doing it.
Hey, fair enough. I'm into it. You got to do what you can to stay sane. You know what my husband and I have been doing, like exercise-wise? Not like we're not gym rats by any means. We're both hefty guys, but we exercise regularly to allow us to eat a lot. And so in order to keep that up, we've just been climbing the stairwells of our buildings. Like we're not allowed to go outside. So we sanitize our hands every time we get to the basement so that you touch the door once, and then sanitize your hands and then just don't touch the railings on the way up. That's how we're trying to stay sane over here.
I'm just giving myself up. I'm letting myself go. Trying to eat better, definitely, and be a little more conscious of that. But in terms of exercise, I'm sorry, I just can't.
No, you know what? I get it too. And as a heftier lad, I do love the idea of if Pride in Vancouver is later than regular season for most places because our summer is so slow to get started. Mm-hmm. So ours is like in early August, so it's not canceled yet. And I do love the idea of there being like a whole pride of gym gays with like Boxing Day bod at the parade because they've been quarantined for so long and they're all slubby like me. I love that idea.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at your flyer for Burger Queen. I have it on my bulletin board here, and have to say those legs are fantastic. I can't picture you.
Thank you very much.
With a Boxing Day body, it's great.
Well, the burger costume obscures a lot of the middle stuff, which was helpful.
And also adds context to any extra weight you might have on.
Absolutely.
I love it. Great album, by the way. I absolutely love it. I've listened to it 3 or 4 times now. I love when you talk about like small town pride and doing shows in small towns. That's something I really relate to because I started in like Kitchener-Waterloo, which is outside of Toronto, and I perform and produce shows in the smaller cities. And they're so crazy. Like it's small town. It's amazing.
Like they come together and they're like a good rapt audience because they appreciate what little entertainment that's geared towards them comes through town. And I mean, I'm sure, prides can always be a nightmare and chaotic situations or whatever, but my experience performing for small town prides, they've been really like my absolute favorite shows I've ever done.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I love it. Fun fact, my very first Pride was Vancouver Pride.
Oh, is that so? What year was that? Or, sorry, is that a rude question? Sorry.
No, not at all. I think it was 2011.
Okay.
2011, 2012. So I lived there for a little over a year and moved just before the Olympics, which was 2012,
Oh,
right?
smart move. 2010.
Yeah, 2010. Okay, so then it was 2009, 2010. It was just a little baby gay. I didn't know it yet. Everybody else did, but I didn't. Yeah.
Well, we all get there on our own time.
Yeah, and it was great. It was so like high fashion, super mask gays in little underwear, and yeah, it was just fabulous. Jack Layton was at the Pride that year.
Yeah, and it should be noted that like Jack Layton, like everyone makes such a big deal about Trudeau being in Pride parades, and like Jack Layton with that daddy mustache was doing the damn thing well before Justin Trudeau.
He was way before it was like it was cool.
They called it the trust dash.
The trust dash. Oh, I love that.
Rest in peace, Jack Layton.
That's what I'm calling my mustache from now on.
Yes, love it.
It's a little mustache. Only I can see it. It's a product of my dysphoria, and I hold it dear to me. Yes. So let's talk a little bit about how things are going right now. So obviously we're in the midst of a pandemic that just seems to be getting worse and worse every day. How are you doing during this time? Are you doing well? I'm
doing okay. I mean, I think it's. I think it's. I feel like ever since Trump got elected, like there have been so many doomsday scenarios running through all of our heads for so long that in a way I feel like it feels a little bit weird how well people have adjusted and just sort of accepted the whole thing. Like, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing necessarily. There's been less. I mean, I haven't witnessed a lot of panic or anything like that, but it seems like people are just sort of falling in line because I don't know. I think it's not like anyone saw this coming, but I just don't really feel super surprised by it. And at any rate, the isolation has not been too difficult for me yet. My husband and I are both big lumbering dudes living in a pretty small apartment, but they say Great Danes make good condo dogs because they're pretty lethargic, and that's kind of the case for us too. We're not biting each other's heads off yet. We're getting along. I think one thing, like we're definitely learning about each other as like, I had no idea that my husband is the kind of man who will take a shit during a conference call. And so that's something I've learned during isolation times. And
that's so admirable.
You know what I mean? On the one hand, I was grossed out, but at the same time, I was like, Daddy just takes what he wants. He doesn't care. He's busy, you know?
Yes,
like,
that's such a flex.
Not knowing if he had muted his mic during was like the most stressful 4 minutes of my life. And then he got out and assured me that he knew what he was doing. But I was like, I can't be known as the guy who married the phone shitter. So at any rate, he sorted it out and we're doing fine. As far as like sort of an effect on stand-up for me, it hasn't been like, I'm not a full-time performer. I have a regular day job, and I just had a weekend at Yucks in Vancouver opening for Toby Hargrave the weekend before Yucks had to shut everything down, so I'm grateful that I got that time in. And I was feeling really like, oh well, I'm just really grateful I have a job that's not affected, but then I did get laid off this week. So but as far as, there are so many people who, had gigs planned for months in advance that they now have to cancel. I've only had to cancel one show because I didn't have a ton on the docket yet. So I've kind of just been watching people freak out more than anything and just trying to figure out what to do about it. But yeah, I've just kind of been sitting in wait.
Yeah. We're going to pedal back a little bit and I'll edit this back in because I just wanted to, you mentioned a really good point that like we were in the grand scheme of things, having a viral pandemic isn't really a huge deal. Because you said like with Trump being in power and things like this, like it's kind of interesting how we are just sort of falling in line. Everything is like we're taking it seriously. Nobody's freaking out. And I think it's kind of like we are taking, how am I going to say this? It's kind of like, we expected a lot worse. Like we don't have nuclear bombs being sent to us from Korea. we don't have race wars on the street. We're not, the economy is suffering for a real reason as opposed to just absolute neglect and misconduct. So that's really good. Yeah.
It's just it's a weird thing. It's not to say that like people are blasé about a pandemic or anything like that, but it's just the news has been so crazy for so long that I just think a lot of people have sort of expected some sort of life-changing something to happen during the Trump years. And this is one that's relatively like, I don't know, like it's lower intensity than say another war or something along those lines.
Yeah. At the end of it, it's like, this isn't so bad. We're not, we're not hungry. I still have a house. Nothing's being bombed. I can do this. I can do this. It's the lesser of evils for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so crazy. So you are, sorry. I'm going to have so much editing to do today. I shouldn't have had that third cup of coffee.
That's all right.
So you mentioned...
One of the two pleasures we have. Sorry, please go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, not at all. So you mentioned you are living with your husband. Are you isolating? You said you're unemployed, or like you were laid off recently.
Yeah, well, like mostly laid off, but I was working remotely from home anyways. I work for a nonprofit, and a number of the like sort of campaigns and fundraisers that we had planned got canceled. So understandable that they had to be careful with staff. Sorry, I'm making excuses for my employer. This doesn't matter. But sorry, what was the question, Alice? I shouldn't have had that second bowl since I woke up this morning.
No problem. I was just asking like what the situation is like. Are you isolating? Are you,
mostly isolating. Like when the news first broke, we stayed at home for 3 days, I think, and then decided, well, we'll go out for a walk on the seawall because we live literally 2 blocks from the seawall here in Vancouver, near English Bay. And we went out and we were just flabbergasted because there were thousands of people there. It was just it was a trade parade like it normally is. No difference at all on the seawall. And so then we got a little bit stricter about it, and rules have gotten stricter and stricter. This was like a week and a half ago, I think. And so we've been mostly isolated aside from going out to buy food or supplies of like basically just a weekly grocery run and any snack runs there in between. But every time I go out, it seems a little stricter and harsher, and like there's a lineup to get into everywhere and markers on the ground everywhere. So yeah, just like minimizing the amount that we go out, but we're not quarantined.
Well, that's good. So you have a bit of a semblance of life. You have
like I like bought a 40-pound bag of rice to put in a backpack to do exercises with, because I just like, you never realize how much you miss like freedom to move around until you're confined to a 600 square foot space. So just trying to find physical things to do to keep sane, but and listening to lots of audiobooks. My number one source of stress right now, because luckily everyone in my life is in good health at this point, is just that I have a serious backlog in my queue for audiobooks, and I only get them for 21 days each. So I've really got to just like lay down and listen to a lot of stuff for the next several weeks.
So you're being more productive. You're
trying to, but you know what I'm not doing is writing new material, which is what everyone should be doing. This is a free pass for, there's so many people cranking out content and making stuff, and I'm like at home absorbing other people's content.
Well, it's at your own pace. I don't know. I've never subscribed to that sort of hustler mentality. That's a lot. There's a lot of that in Toronto, where you're not, if you're not doing like 2 or 3 open mics a night, and you're not constantly writing new material and working towards that like tighter 5 minutes, and then that great headliner set and all of these things. But we all have like, our situations are different. I haven't written new material in like 6 months.
Yeah.
And I haven't taken this as an opportunity to write new material because this isn't how I write. I write on stage, I write at shows, I write when I'm out. I write when I'm doing all of those things that I can't do right now.
Right, fair enough.
So it would be really counterintuitive for me to be writing in this sort of isolation.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, and I think it's fair too to like, I don't know, a lot less seems funny or like, I don't know. I also just don't want to crank out generic COVID, like I don't want to just write about, I don't know. I just haven't found, what I mean to say is I haven't found the funny in this yet. So I haven't written about it.
Absolutely. That's very fair. And also there's going to be coming out of this, there's going to be so much COVID material that
Oh, totally.
I'm not writing. Like I am producing a podcast on COVID, but I'm not writing a single joke. I'm not writing any material whatsoever for the stage on COVID because it's going to be so hacked.
Yeah. There will be a lot of it for sure.
And I understand it's topical, but maybe it's a little too easy. I don't know.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Vancouver, because in Toronto and in sort of these circles that I've seen, there are a lot of people doing some really interesting things. So obviously we can't get onto a stage. We can't really perform in that regard, but people are doing great things. Do you see that sort of happening with comedians in your circles?
Absolutely. There are like in Vancouver and Victoria, there's like digital open mics happening through Zoom and writers groups and that sort of thing. So there have been a lot of people just trying to do stuff to keep us all connected. It's also coming at a tough time in Vancouver because I think the number of rooms in the state of the scene is always in sort of either, flux or it goes through ebb and flow. And I think it's been sort of like a lot of open mics had been canceled recently, and it's just been a tough time for the community for the month leading up to this anyway. So I think it's been sort of extra heartwarming to see people making a point of staying connected. And I think more than anything else, a lot of people are just cranking out a ton of content through their Instagram and just sort of, there's just a lot of posting going on, but there have been some meetups and some other stuff that I've seen posted online that's been cool.
And a lot of people are putting online content out there. Do you know of any? Can you recommend any that listeners can check out?
Yes, and I'm just pulling it up on my phone real quick here.
Yeah, of course.
Because there was an article about it in the Georgia Straight. John Cranny, who does a lot of covering the Vancouver comedy scene here, has been really good about posting like albums that people can stream and listen to. And also there's other stuff like the Sunday Service, which is a really great improv troupe in Vancouver. They perform at the Fox Cabaret every Sunday. And they're doing, I believe, online Sunday service. There's a bunch of other stuff. Jokes Please, which is another great show here. I know they've already done one digital show, and I believe they'll be doing more as well. So all of the links are on georgiastraight.com. The article to look up is Vancouver Comedy Community Finding a Way Through the COVID-19 Isolation with Digital Shows by John Cranny. You can Google any part of that. All of the links are there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll add the link to the show description as well so that it's up for people to see. I think it's a really interesting time, and I'd love your perspective on how isolation is impacting comics, because stand-up comedy is one of those art forms that it's a unique art form in that it requires an audience, and it's very audience response driven.
Right.
And I see a lot of people trying to translate that directly online onto their Instagram stories or their live streams.
Right.
And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So do you think that it could be like shifting the way people approach their art, and maybe it's informing them to change it and adapt it to these different mediums?
I think it's possible. I really don't know. I think there are some people who, without the opportunity to hear something bomb, will just kind of may just sort of spiral and just sort of churn out shit. Because if they're just in their own echo chamber putting out what they think is funny anyways, I wonder because when you post stuff through your Instagram story, you might get people a few post the cry laugh emoji or whatever, but it's not the same. You're not really able to gauge a room's response based on stuff that you're putting out there. So I wonder if it may just intensify some people's bullshit. I'm really not sure.
That's true. It can just, I don't know. I'm seeing a lot of, and I can speak from myself because I have done a couple of little projects where I'm performing stand-up, like traditional stand-up. I'm performing my material into a camera and it doesn't work whatsoever. But I still have that need to put out content. And as a producer and with my brand, I feel like I need to stay relevant. So I'm trying to find different things to do. So I'm learning to, like this podcast, I've done a lot of comedic writing projects, and the things that I put online aren't necessarily like my polished material. I'll do really stupid shit like take my dog for a walk, or I did this Instagram live session where it's called Wrong Answers. So people can ask me questions. They can ask me absolutely anything. It's like an AMA, but all of the answers that I give have to be lies. They have to be wrong answers. And
I love it.
I'm doing another segment called Awkward Conversations. So what I do is
that's great. And like as far as like just people, I think forcing people to try new styles of getting their sort of point of view across, that's great. I do hope to see more of that from more comics, myself included. Because like it's you know all of these different things you're trying. I've been at home like so it's like that's inspiring. That's a lot of different things to try.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because for the past decade, I feel like stand-up comedy has been resisting the technological shift. We've really been hesitant to embrace YouTube and Vine and things like that. And the people who do embrace them, like when you have a podcaster on a show or a YouTube star on a comedy show, and we've seen it at Just for Laughs, there's a lot of negative feedback from comedians saying like, that's not stand-up. That's somebody who's thinks they're funny in front of a camera and they don't know how to engage with an audience and all of these things. So there's been this divide, but technology keeps shifting forward. It keeps progressing. And we have all of these new platforms to reach out to people. And I think it's a really exciting time that now our stage is taken away from us. So it's Darwinian. It's adapt or get left behind.
Right. And it's interesting to see because, you know, undoubtedly a part of trying to make a career in comedy, you have to self-promote. Like, especially as Canadian performers, nobody is going to cheerlead you and like build you up to be this, you know what I mean? Like you have to create that shit. And it's under like a lot of comics are very self-loathing, and the self-promotion part of it is really, you know, sort of the hated part of the job, but it's such a necessary part of the job too. And it's, I think COVID will definitely sort of bring that out in a lot of people. They'll realize how bad they want it and they'll start pushing a lot harder.
Yeah, and a lot of people, when
and others will die off and just realize it's not for them, and that's okay too.
Well, that's the thing. You may have people, and that's the state of Canadian comedy that we know so well, is that it's not a lucrative business, so we don't have the opportunities to hire agents and managers and marketers and all of these things. Right. So we have to be those people for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Simon King, who's a really awesome comic that's based in Vancouver, has an old joke about when people ask Canadian stand-ups if you have a manager. It's like, it's hard to get a manager because nobody wants to work for 15% of 2 drink tickets.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's true. Yeah. How do you get a cut of that? No, it's totally true. And it's sad. So this is... It's kind of difficult because this is asking comedians who have already diversified their skill levels and their talents to adopt technical skills as well, and adopt additional skills to spread yourself across different platforms. But I think when all of this comes, you know, back around, maybe back to normal, I don't know what normal is going to look like later, but when things get out of a pandemic, I think you will have comedians who will have learned lessons about using different tools, and you will have other comedians who are just like, thank God, I finally have a stage again. I can go back to being a performer. Right. And there's nothing wrong with really either of those, I think.
Totally. I totally agree.
So in this time, I know you said you're not a full-time, like a career comedian, but obviously this is a time where you don't have the opportunities to self-promote and to go out to different shows. and keep yourself relevant,
Mm-hmm.
other than just sharing old media and doing what you can. Can you tell me a little bit about how audiences can support you during this time? What can audiences do to help and to support Vancouver comics as well? If you can, speak for your entire community, that'd be great.
Well, I mean, for all of the other Vancouver comics out there, most of the ones that I think are going to be hit hardest by this are actually the ones who run weekly shows that are being shut down because of they take place in restaurants and venues that can't host people. Everywhere's shut down right now, I guess. But so if you follow them and just keep abreast of whatever shows that they're posting online or things that you can do to support them. Laugh Gallery is one that Graham Clark runs. Jokes Please is another weekly one that'll be negatively affected by this. They're all on Instagram, I believe, and they'll be posting any upcoming events that they're doing that they'll be fundraising through. So whatever city you live in, whatever scene you love, or if they're just comics out there, you want to support, just follow them on social media. Be sure to sort of keep your eyes peeled for any ways that they're trying to fundraise during this time and support those.
And then when the bars open again, go out and
get the hell out there.
Yes,
yeah, absolutely.
Check out live entertainment, because especially in a city as vibrant as Vancouver, there's something for everybody, whether it's...
for sure. And you know what, though? I think I do hope that one sort of silver lining that comes of all of this is that Vancouver realizes how sort of taken for granted our own venues and scenes are, and sort of revitalizes their desire to support them, because they
absolutely,
they've always needed it.
Right. And Netflix and Yuck Yucks, they're going to be okay. But these smaller venues and these smaller comedians, the more local comedians, are getting hit a lot harder. So, and that goes for
and one more thing I could plug to support would be just Little Mountain Gallery. Follow them on social media as well, because they're a small venue that's already dealing with future eviction and other issues, and they run a lot of shows and performers that'll be negatively affected by this for sure.
That's wonderful. That's so much to take away. Definitely for listeners, check out all of these great people and all of these great resources. Thank you for sharing those. Before we finish, I just need one more thing for you. So I like to give for every episode, I like to give a tip for how to survive the pandemic. And these tips are adapted from my very own notes on surviving the zombie apocalypse.
Love it.
So my tip today is to stockpile hard copy, physical copies of pornography, because when the power goes out and everybody has been stockpiling TP and hand sanitizer, you'll have the good goods that people will actually want to barter with.
You know what? I have a drawer full of loose pages of old school gay pornography, and now I never realized how valuable it's now become. So thank you for that.
In the new world order, that will be currency. People prophesize that toilet paper is going to be our new currency. No, it's going to be edibles and and physical pornography, like magazines.
It used to be gas, or grass, and now it's going to be weed gummies, ethanol, or honcho, back issues of honcho.
Exactly. So you're a rich man.
Love it.
I like that. Do you have any fun tips for surviving the pandemic?
My survival mechanism so far has just been a lot of crying in the shower and scratch till I bleed, because they say it's important to maintain routines and act the same way you did before the pandemic.
I love that.
That's about it.
Also keeping fit with Doomsday Preppers style exercises with 40-pound bags of rice on your back.
A 40-pound bag of rice in a backpack. I've also just been doing lots of stairwell climbing in the building that I live in, because I live in a tall building, and that helps me feel sane. I promise I'm not touching anything on the way up or down.
There you go. Very, very socially conscious. I love that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for chatting with me. This has been such a pleasure.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Stay safe and wash your hands. I think, are we oversaying that to each other? I feel condescending ever saying to anyone, don't forget to wash your hands. I feel like they'd look at me and be like, fuck you, I'm clearly a cleaner person than you, Steve.